I run an education center called RD3 Education around character development and student development. I spent 23 years at Choate Rosemary Hall, more than the last half of that as admission director, and the first half of that as hockey coach with the highly regarded Bill Maniscalco, who runs the Northford Ice Pavilion. And so Bill and I go way back. So education, school, hockey, student development, character development have all been big things in my professional life. And as an old hockey guy, played college hockey at Bowdoin College, seeing the unbelievable investment parents make and kids make in the sport, I have a passion to try to do something with like-minded partners like Peter Alden to make it more, get more out of it for everybody involved. I see, and you all see probably as we speak, how education is changing right before our very eyes. Every NHL or college or scout or school person that comes in to talk to the players or to us talks about the process and the journey being different and evolving literally as we speak. So when I saw the kind of work that Peter Alden was doing with Elite, the kind of level of excellence that he demanded of the program, of himself, and the people that are part of it, it caught my attention in a significant way, and I honestly wanted to be a part of it and see what I could contribute from my angle of things. So essentially, over the summer, we come up with this concept of CAP: character, attitude, and performance. The idea that every parent and student player comes into the organization wanting to improve in these three things. For the diehard hockey player, obviously you want to get as best as you can possibly be through sport and training. Parents want their children to come out of these programs being even better kids than they were when they went in. And I think especially for the non-hockey parent who may have walked by a locker room or two and not been impressed with what they heard, Elite and I want this program to have the best attitude with the best approach to life, to sport, to friendship, to success. So we're in our pilot year of doing this work together. And essentially we've been going in through the academy window. And this is actually the first formal presentation to the rest of the organization, if you will, to introduce what we've been doing and some concepts of sort of where we're going with it. So again, from my standpoint, it's meeting up with an organization that cares about a lot of things that I care about. And that's where the partnership started and where it, we hope where it's going. Again, organizationally, I was asking Peter the other day about, future plans for community involvement, and I'll talk a little bit later about that as whether you have a mite or a midget, or you are a mite or a midget, and you're looking down the road, right? You want to pick your head up and look at the future and see what's coming. You want to know what's important and what your child or what you should be doing to be the most successful you can be and be on the right pathway. So I'm happy and proud to see that Elite's doing things in the community. Obviously, they have their classroom through Academy, and they have, an awesome reputation for skill development and team play on the ice. So as I watch this model evolve, I can tell that it's going to bring a lot of excitement to the table. So before I jump into the character piece and then the attitude piece, I just want to kind of give you a little update. And for the Academy players that may or may not be on this call, I know some of them may be skating or studying right now. But essentially what we've focused on for the fall has been character. And there's two buckets of character I'll talk about in a moment, and performance as well. We've also talked about what I call AQ, which is your articulation quotient, your ability to public speak. So public speaking, being an impressive human being, the way you can articulate yourself, express yourself, the way you carry yourself, etc. And I know, again, Elite has put a lot of stock into making that a priority, making it important. So having just had a couple of sessions with the Academy kids and the 15 and 16 group and the 16 or the 18 and PG group, one of the things that I got from them as far as feedback from the fall and early winter was that was something they really enjoyed and was highlighted for them. By way of a little bit of background, before I move forward with my slides, when I was admission director at Choate Rosemary Hall, the last year, which was 4 years ago, I think our selectivity rate was 15%. So we were taking 1.5 out of 10 kids who applied, and those 10 kids were pretty darn impressive. So I think the players have gotten a little bit of an inside view in my weekly meetings in the fall with them, just as what matters, what makes a difference, what rules you out, what rules you in. And I think, Peter Alden and his staff of coaches is doing the same exact thing on the ice when they're teaching, the sport of hockey, of what makes a difference and what allows you to move forward and succeed. So great partnership. Been very excited about it. Loving what Elite's doing and trying to move this pilot program, if you will, into some more particular space. Just a light allusion to this, I do in my own work, and I've done for the last 25 years, work on character. Maybe I'll jump ahead for a second here, have you understand a little bit better. There's two buckets of character. There's moral character, human beings, how you raise your children, how you are as a player. If you're a player listening to this right now, you decide what qualities and characteristics you want to have in yourself, and your family instills them. Ideally, Elite and any organization you're associated with does as well. That's the moral character bucket. We're human beings. Then we're also human doings. That's the performance character. That's the kids tend to get a little more excited about, how do I succeed? What are the characteristics I need? I'm just putting a couple of examples here with grit and initiative in the performance character bucket. There are several, and likewise in the moral character bucket. So those are the two buckets. All the academy players this fall did a personal analysis of their 24 universal character strengths. Again, with time being sacred, I'm not going to dig into this more than just showing you what the 24 are. They fall into different buckets: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, and temperance. And each person has their own typical profile. So the concept moving forward is to do team profiles such that a coach is going to know what his team is about before they even step on the ice, whether there's a particular strength there of creativity or zest or humility, whatever it might be, self-regulation, which is, ability not to retaliate when someone slashes you. Interesting. So trying to bring a little bit of big data to the forefront of the sports world, which if you watch any professional college sports, you'll know that's kind of a big deal these days. So really just introducing this topic. I'd love to have more conversation with anybody who's willing to chat about it as we move forward. But it's been, and so I did a little profile of the academy group to see what their characteristics were. And again, did some self-reflection with the players themselves about how they ranked and how they stacked up. So moving along, again, two buckets of character. One thing that you all may think about as I try to sort of describe some takeaways, things that can be helpful for you, is I always asked my families that I worked with in both my admission job and my job now, is a question that sometimes stumped them a little bit, or at least made them a little bit anxious or nervous, and had the parents kind of chatting with each other about what the answer might be. But what's your character plan? What's your personal character plan to develop yourself? And as parents, what is your character plan for your child? One way I like to say it is, what do you stand for and what do you sit for? What will you stand up and do something about, what matters to you, and what will you let pass by? Kids don't often know what's important to them and valuable to them, and what they're willing to do. I like the hockey analogy or the example. I know as a coach for just about every year of my adult life, I would make it very clear when the team would have enough. It usually was around the goaltender, and so I kind of gave a little open ticket to defend the goalie whenever there was any activity, but I had very little patience for players who would retaliate in the offensive zone. The other question that parents, and again, this is probably more for the parents in this one situation, the question I would ask you, and it goes back to 25 years ago when prep schools, boarding schools, private schools started to develop questionnaires and start to value things in their community more than they did before. So the one question that would also come into the parents' forefront was, what values have you instilled in your child that we might experience in our school? Actually, I think I may or may not have suggested to Peter that have the same questionnaire for the hockey teams, so that the coach would know what they're getting and what they could help hold the students or the children or the players accountable for. So, if you're listening to this as a parent right now, whether you have young kids or you're an 18-year-old listening to this right now, I think the question is going to go on. It's going to endure throughout your whole life. What do you value? What do you stand for? And as parents, particularly, what values have you instilled in your child? So if nothing else, if you can take this as an opportunity to talk about that with your son tonight, use this as an excuse, by all means. The goal for tonight was to pull out the A from the cap and talk about attitude. And the scientific way that we would do that is to talk about mindsets, fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. People may be familiar with Carol Dweck's book, which I'll get into in a moment. But I think, I love hockey, I love sport, but I'm a little disappointed sometimes when I walk through hockey rinks or athletic fields, and whether it's the language I hear or the attitude toward the refs or whatever it might be. And so, Peter Alden and I certainly agree on this concept that attitude in life is a big deal, and that we'd like to further develop a program that holds kids accountable for their attitude. When I talk to the players or students, and I remind them how I used to pick, 1 out of 10 kids, attitude was huge. As soon as I saw attitude in any little way being negative, they were at the back of the line. And, when you're taking 1 or 2 kids out of 10, it's hard to get back up to the front of the line. And believe me, people are watching all the time. So having a great attitude, demonstrating a great attitude. My old players would know that I love just the concept of when a goal is scored. I'm absolutely watching the team that got scored on to see what happens, how their body language responds, how they support their goalie or don't. I mean, any goalie parent can tell you, and I'm not one, but I can feel it. If your kid lets in a goal and that those players in some way, body, shape, or form, show they're disappointed, they're not happy, it's a killer. It's a team killer. So little things like that. Just, technically speaking, growth mindset, there's 2 kinds of mindsets. There's a fixed mindset, which I hope you can see my slides, which is that you believe you are who you are and there's not much you can do about it. That's another way of saying you kind of have a poor attitude, that you don't believe you can grow, you don't believe with work is going to come success, and you're, maybe even a little grumpy. So coaches don't like those kids, teachers don't like those kids, parents love their children, they deal with those kids, but we're all trying to get people out of that fixed mindset and have an orientation of belief. The growth mindset clearly is, with a plan and practice, you can develop, and that's a huge concept. Let's see. Sorry, I won't jump into this yet, and believe me, there's no quiz or no test on this. But one thing we all see in sports is, let me say it this way: that we're all dealt a hand of cards, right? When you're little, you're the small kid on the team, you're the big kid on the team, you're the talented kid, the middle kid, the bottom kid. But we all know as you move up and grow and develop, all that can change in one season and a half a season, particularly in the growth spurt years. But it's your attitude that's going to dictate how far you go and how far you grow. And I think it's elite's position and my position that if we're getting a top kid, so to speak, talent-wise, hockey-wise, that we want that kid to go as far as they possibly can. If we're getting someone else who may have been dealt a little, average stick handling card or maybe a slow skating card, you can do that. You can overcome that. You can get past that, but not without a plan, not without a growth mindset, and not without one of the key things I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. This is not for really right now, but I'm going to give you resources that you can use moving forward. There are assessments. I've lived in this world for almost 30 years. This one, you can just, I'll show you a link later, but you can Google the mindset scale. It take you less than 5 minutes to do. You give a score, it's right below there. But more importantly than getting a score, it's reading the questions and understanding that there are right and wrong answers. It has to do with your attitude, and your attitude could be environmentally based. It's things that were affected you when you grew up, how you're the chatter in your house, the school atmosphere, whatever it might be. But there's no doubt in my mind that your mindset has to be constantly looked at and adjusted, and you need good positive role models in your life, coaches, teachers, parents, to show you the way to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. So mindset is huge. You know, I think I have some pictures if I didn't show them already, but you know, this attitude of gratitude. I tell you, there's so many negative people in the world, and there's so many kids in a hockey rink who will complain at the refs. If you're just the one kid or two kids, or let's go for the whole elite program that treats referees, officials, opposing team parents, whatever the case, with respect and gratitude, it can really change your outcomes in life. So there's no doubt that that elite wants us to be a part of the culture, and that it's in my line of work, noticing those little things in kids is easy, because there's a lot of kids that don't exhibit that. And again, I think from a value of investment in a program like Elite or any youth program, you want your kid to come out of the program with a better attitude than when they went in. And if they went in with a great attitude, you sure as heck don't want them coming out sour. And that takes a core values-oriented program that understands the value of attitude. And it takes adults knowing a little bit of the science behind it and how to handle and manage kids in an effective and positive way. So I'm going to just jump a little bit back into this concept of simplifying things for you. I take 28 years of work in my field of student assessment, candidate assessment, hockey player assessment, human assessment, and I say, okay, you know, this is my area of expertise and passion, certainly. And I've boiled it down to two simple things that, again, as a takeaway, these are on my website, but I can recite them pretty quickly. I don't think the audio is going to work on this, but this is Sir Ken Robinson. It's in the top 5, if not the top 2 all-time watched TED Talks. Sadly, he passed away a few months ago, but it was the guru of education, creativity, and human development. And so he says something that I think I have the text here that'll help you, but I'm going to play it at 16 seconds. So we have to recognize human flourishing is not a mechanic. So that's the key. The last part is the key. You, as a parent, as a player, as a student, as a person, you want to create the conditions under which you will flourish. Now, there's never been a time more challenging for creating conditions to flourish than COVID-19, right? So I know when I talk to my students or my parents or my families here, you know, one of the things I point out is that I have in my own life, to the best of my ability, with the resources that I have, created that environment, my work environment, my home environment, you know, my workout environment, whatever it might be. So as a player, whether you're young or old, you constantly have to ask yourself, what's the environment in which I can thrive? You know, is it cold? Is it warm? And you have to think about specifics, like what kind of coach do I function best under? If anybody's seen the documentary In Search of Greatness with Gretzky and Pele and Michael Jordan, etc., there's a nice scene in there when Michael Jordan leaves, I think it was Brampton, you know, when he was 16, headed for the NHL, but he got to one of his hockey programs and they They were a dump and chase kind of program, and that's not Wayne Gretzky's style. And so he knew it, and he knew it right away. He knew he would not grow and develop in that environment. And so, again, I think with these the wonderful progression of an elite hockey academy, constantly trying to say what's the right environment for the players to flourish and to grow and develop. And you should be asking yourself the same question. For the young kids, what school situation, what program, what kind of coach, and again, some of these character assessments and reflections can be super helpful. So that's more of the parent job, obviously, to think about as yourself individually. So what is the situation? Create an environment where you're able to flourish. The other piece, which does not have a subtitle, is Scott Van Pelt talking about his one big thing. And this was when there was a few years ago, there was a basketball, the Michigan State coach, I believe, was yelling at his players, and it became this whole controversy over was he being too tough on them? He was holding them accountable for things they had done in practice 100 times. And while he was yelling at them and people were saying, oh, poor players, he's getting yelled at by his coach, his players were saying, no, that we're accountable, we're responsible. And the nice little quip that Van Pelt uses is, he says this, you should not prepare the path for your children. You should prepare yourself for the path, right? So in Canada, they call them curling parents, right? They're sweeping the way clear for their child to have the perfect experience. Well, if they're going to have a perfect experience their whole life, I guess that's going to work out. But in the real world, you get off the sweeping court and you enter something called the real world. And if you're not prepared to succeed, it's going to be pretty heavy on you. And so again, what does Elite do as a hockey program? It says, what are the core skills that we need to develop in our players? Skill-wise, hockey-wise, what is the attitude we need to develop in our players? And what are the character attributes that are going to be critical for you as a player to advance? So these to me are the two big questions. If you, again, I'm not an expert parent, that's testimony by my children, believe me. But I know the questions to ask. What do I need to equip my child with to, make it in the real world? And what are the conditions? And how can I control those conditions? You can't always control the conditions. You just do the best you can with what you've got, as they say. So two very important things right there, Sir Ken Robinson and Scott Van Pelt. Sorry, there it goes again. Okay, so this is the, I'm gonna switch a little bit and I'm checking my time. I'm almost 7:30, okay, so we're okay here. How will your child grow? How will you grow? And what kind of kid are you, right? So this is my amateur photography. We have on the left, or my left, looking at the screen, we have a weed growing in the concrete, okay? I promise you I did not fertilize that. I didn't water it. I haven't checked the angle of the sun. That is one tough, whatever it is, growing in the concrete. And I think maybe others have seen weeds growing on I-95. They probably don't have to worry about the conditions under which they will grow and flourish. Somehow they make it. And I hate to say that some of you are weeds, but that's a huge compliment if you are. Now, the weed is a double-edged sword because just because your kid is tough or they seem to land on their feet wherever they go, it doesn't mean you neglect them and spend your energy somewhere else. It just means you've got more options. You can survive more situations. You may not have to be as particular. I didn't get a picture of an orchid because I don't have one, but I have on the other side is just, flowers that need more attention. They're a little more delicate, perhaps. They're a little more need a particular climate, etc. So you have to think about what you need to grow, and you have to create those conditions, and you have to investigate very seriously the kind of opportunity and situation you want to be in. So it's not a bad metaphor. I know I have a lot of fun with this one because I'm the kind of person who doesn't pay attention to the arborvitae or the tree that I buy at the nursery, where at the nursery, just like your children at home, they're perfect, right? Perfect out of the womb into your household, and then you're going to transplant them to the Elite Hockey Academy or the school or the home, wherever they're going, and you want them to care for your child. You want them to care for you. But that's just it's a concept to behold. Plants also, by the way, come with tags and instructions. Kids do not. So that's why we have to do a lot of the self-reflection and evaluation so that you can see what kind of care and maintenance you need. And as we all know, with a little humor, some of us are more high maintenance than others. A lot of times we all get busy with life, and we're doing our thing and we're looking down, and we don't have a chance to look up. And I think any hockey player knows what happens when you don't look up. You get smacked sometimes because you're not sort of looking what's ahead in the future. So I just want to take a moment now as I think about the future, 2021. I'm getting closer to some of the takeaways and the suggestions for the future. But everybody here is probably at least considering a pathway to college and college hockey. It seems to be the prize for so many these days. So a lot of kids don't actually look up until they're just about on the edge of the college process. And sometimes it's too late, sometimes it's not. But I advise, in your busy lives, whenever you can look up and look ahead, it's like Gretzky. It's not the next pass, it's 2 passes ahead. You're not going where the puck is, you're going where it's going to be. Developmentally, you're also singing the same song. You want to go and look at college websites, which is exactly where I took this from, to see what they're looking for and to see how you might develop yourself and be involved in these certain things as you head on your pathway toward college. You'll find that they're very similar. Intellectual curiosity, enthusiasm for learning, to read a few of the bolds, creative, proactive problem solver, generosity toward others, civic engagement, much like the elite program Raking Leaves for veterans, I believe, in the fall. Willingness to work hard and ask for help when needed. These all do translate to the hockey rink for sure. Enthusiasm for a new drill, enthusiasm for a new forecheck, solving problems on the team, be it social or practical on the ice, being kind, being generous to others. It's a little pick list, again, for parents to say, these are the 3 things. One of the first questions I ask kids when I work with them is, what values have your parents instilled in you? And a lot of them don't have an answer for the question. Honestly, I work with them and find eventually answers, because usually what happens is, like it or not, you're modeling behavior. So you have demonstrated the values you want your children to pick up on, good or bad, throughout your life. But my pitch is that it's far better to be intentional and direct. And again, so when your child or you get in a situation, the kid slashes your goalie, you're taking him out, right? But kid slashes you in the corner when the game's tied, you're not retaliating. Your values. You're not gonna fall for that. But you're not gonna put up with any nonsense around the thing that's most important to you. Can you sense an affection for goalies I have here? So again, just the idea is to kind of look ahead. I'm just going to introduce a couple more of these simple little scales. So whether you have a young child, you're an older kid yourself, at any age, honestly, some of these things work. Characteristics that matter. I've been involved in measuring growth, success, assessing kids for, again, 28 years now. 2 of the easier ones to kind of point out are grit and self-efficacy. Obviously, they show up. I'll talk about self-efficacy in a moment. Grit is fairly self-explanatory. It's the kid who's digging for the puck, who, the puck goes the other way and there's no hesitation. Anybody that's heard me coach will know my huge pet peeve is reaction time when the puck goes the other way. I can pick out the kid I want on my team in a second by virtue of their reaction time to the puck changing ice. And I think Rand Pecknold will tell you, back pressure was one of his secrets to success for all these years, is that intense back check pressure on the puck. Obviously, it means something different in school. Self-efficacy, for sure, is important, and I'll chime on that a little bit. I don't expect you to read this, but I just wanted to put it in one slide. Angela Duckworth, whom I work with on some bigger projects, sort of national efforts and projects I'm involved with. She has a grit test. Maybe a lot of your parents have seen this. Maybe some of your kids have seen it. You can Google it and find it. And again, in less than 5 minutes, you can have your grit score. But again, the questions that they're asking, and what it means to be gritty. And then again, you can have that be part of your parenting philosophy, your coaching philosophy, your personal philosophy to be a more gritty kid. But we know these things matter. We know they're important. And again, you can Google it yourself, or I'll be sharing the links. I was involved for many years, actually way back, the late 90s. Whew, did I just say that? The late 90s with Yale's Center for Human Development and Dr. Robert Sternberg. And I was just so lucky to be involved with this project for about 15 years. And we developed a number of scales, and one of them is called the Self-Efficacy Scale. And that is, it's not the same as self-confidence or self-esteem. It's belief in oneself, though, right? So if you're, I know my son's on the U15 team, and they've had some wins, they've had some losses, but they've played some really top teams. And one thing you can tell when you walk into a locker room is if there's not a single kid in their locker room that believes you can win the game, you've already lost the game. So that's where the mindset and the attitude and the belief in oneself, which is in part instilled by practice, preparation, attitude, the coaches, your approach to the game. But I just picked out a few of the questions we would ask, and you kind of rate yourself on a scale here of 1 to 9, and you come up with a score. And this proved to be incredibly important to success academically at a school like Choate, and a lot of studies have represented or replicated the same concept, that self-efficacy is one of the most predictive factors in success. So if you find yourself with on a team, or finding yourself not believing in yourself, you've got to have a plan to address that. You've got to reach out to the coach, you've got to reach out to your teacher, to your family, to your support network, and say, all right, I don't think there's any way I can retrieve the puck with this 6'3", 220-pound kid, pressure. What am I gonna do? I'm just gonna, I'm a cop out. So you need a plan. You need confidence, and confidence comes through. I'm gonna steal my punchline a little bit, though. Confidence comes through a term called deliberate practice, and that's gonna be one of the takeaways. I'll talk about deliberate practice shortly. So this scale is not available anywhere, and again, the point of these exercises is to create context, right? So nothing really means much without context, right? You're fast. Well, compared to whom, right? Compared to tier 3, tier 2, tier 1, elite, whatever it's called. It's all context. And so confidence, self-efficacy, self-esteem, it's all relative to where you are and the situation you've been put in. But I just wanted to highlight it as we head into the new year, and you think about, as a player, as a parent, what can you be looking at? These are some of the things, and there's tools out there: mindset, grit, self-efficacy, to help you manage that and look through it. So there again, we'll try to make this available somewhere at some time. If not, you can quite quickly find these scales and use them to measure your current state. Just a word now on sort of the educational focus on the future. What schools are measuring. This is the space where I am absolutely in it 24/7. Excuse me. I'm part of a few different groups. I'll spare you the details, but with this being a COVID year and a lot of colleges going test optional, there's a lot of chatter around assessment and predicting who will be successful in school, admitting kids in particular areas. I've been on the forefront of this work in the secondary school space with private school, boarding school, prep school, and one of my goals is to help bring it to the athletic arena, to programs like Elite, which is the partnership we have this year, trying some of these things on. So what are schools looking at? Again, this whole idea of kind of picking your head up and looking to see, how might I be? I mean, it's not as if schools are going to dictate your parenting style or how you raise your child, but not for nothing, there's faculties, researchers, all asking the question every day of their lives: what matters? Who's succeeding? Why? And so if you can take from that knowledge and use it to apply it for your hockey team, your school, your family, your business, whatever it might be, you're going to be in good shape. So SSAT, I led a think tank on the future of assessment for SSAT, which is the secondary school admission test. They have another wing, which has now gotten into character development. And they've identified these key characteristics and put them in 3 different categories: interpersonal, teamwork, social awareness across the borders, if you will, intrapersonal, self-control, responsibility, resilience, initiative, things you look into yourself and see how you're doing. The academy kids, I use the tool to measure where they are with this, so they have a sense whether it's in their top 5, bottom 5, where they are with those abilities. My hope is in the future to do more team profiles, team analysis, and allow coaches to then potentially communicate with their players, work on particular things with their players as they move forward. In the intellectual domain, it's just the curiosity and the open-mindedness. So again, as a coach, if I bring the players in and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to introduce a new penalty kill, or I'm going to introduce a new power play, I'm really focusing on the eyes looking back at me and the body language and the attitude. And if I have anybody going negative on me, I'm just not impressed. I want them to be curious. I want them to wonder how it's going to help us. I want them to wonder how it's going to work. And I want them to be open-minded. They could prove me wrong, believe me, it's happened plenty of times, but I don't want them to start there. I don't want to start with a fixed mindset. I want them to have that growth mindset. So coaches, parents, players, everybody can start doing these things with their kids and their teams. And this is where, Peter and I are talking about how to implement some of these things without overwhelming everyone in the process. So just a quick peek as I wind toward the tail end of this chat. Here are the 7 things: initiative, and they're pretty self-explanatory. But again, this is the one thing I didn't say enough of so far, and I know Peter would remind me every time he can, is that I talk about character, attitude. It's really leadership. And one of the best things I ever heard in my young career was there's 2 kinds of leadership. There's capital L, which is, the captain, the cook, the CEO, the mom who's in charge. And then there's lowercase L, which is the person who's responsible, accountable, takes initiative, shows up. These are all very key leadership skills that do not require a C on your jersey, but are essential to a team's success. So again, you notice these things in kids. If you're me in my profession, and if you're you just being a regular living life, I'm sure you notice it too, some more than others perhaps, but everyone loves a kid with initiative, right? I mean, who doesn't love the kid that takes out the trash before you ask him to take out the trash? I mean, points city. Who doesn't love a kid that empties the dishwasher before someone says, can you empty the dishwasher? I mean, huge, just amazing. So if you're a student or player listening to this, take note. Fast way to the top, take initiative. We talked about the intellectual curiosity. Again, it's just be curious. Even if you're not that interested, maybe you will be after you find that. Open-mindedness again. And so what this organization has done, it's the secondary school admission test organization, is they've for many years, I worked with them at the start, and over several years developed a battery of questions that maybe some of you have taken if you've ever applied to private school in the last couple of years. And through a series of questions, they can put you on a scale, compare you to other kids, and kind of have a sense of where you are with these characteristics. Resilience is fairly self-explanatory. We all know that. Self-control, ability to control your thoughts, emotions, and actions. Obviously, you see this on the ice. And again, the same concept applies in the hockey rink that it does in the classroom, which is that if you know the profile of your team and your players, some kids, it's easy for them to have self-control. They're not inclined to retaliate. They're not inclined to do X, Y, or Z. Others are very much inclined. And it may not be their fault, so to speak. It's just where they are, period. And so as a coach, as I used to say as a coach, I'm not going to treat you all equally, but I will treat you all fairly. It just means you're in a different place at a different time. I've got to take a different approach to get you where you need to be. But self-control is a huge one. And we measure self-control on these assessments, so kids kind of have a sense where they are relative to their peers. Social awareness is maybe self-explanatory, but again, when I'm going to evaluate a group of kids, or when I'm looking for the smartest kid in the bunch, or the most impressive kid in the bunch, is a better way that I like to say it, I'm really watching how they interact with their peers. And again, for the younger kids in the program, what an amazing learning environment to have the locker room, the emotions of a game, the lessons you can learn from that. And to have a program like Elite that's focused on that and is looking for ways to implement it and partner with parents and families, at least on some of the core things. And of course, teamwork is a no-brainer. But again, if I ask, I don't know, all the players in the program, how do they define, what are the actions of a good teammate? They could probably come up with them, actually. But it's a nice exercise to go through. And again, we reward the behaviors that matter to us. And so that's important to do as well. So my last thing I'm going to talk about and leave you with is just sort of this, I call it the New Year's resolution. The Academy kids, as you may know, and some of you maybe are on the call or will be listening to it at some point, went down south to Florida, had a great session from what I heard. I'm sorry I couldn't join it. But they met with, or at least an old player of mine who went on to play for the Montreal Canadiens. Matthew Darcy happens to be the director of hockey operations for Tampa Bay Lightning. And so he was just a short drive over from the team and came over and talked about the book on the left, Practice Perfect. It's a book that the whole organization, Tampa Bay Lightning, who just won the Stanley Cup, of course, everybody in the organization read the book and, essentially had book group around this. And one of the things that it talked about, which is exactly what the other book, I don't know if I'm recommending it to read it. The one on the right's a little heavier. If you're a child development wannabe, psychology wannabe like me, then you'd love reading these books. But they both talk about one thing, which is this concept of deliberate practice. So you may have heard of the book Outliers. Malcolm Gladwell wrote probably 10 years ago now, but he's the one who came up with the 10,000 hour rule. If you really want to make it to the pros or Olympics, you've got to put in 10,000 hours of practice. And the humor around that was that, well, if you don't practice the right way, then you become really bad at bad habits. And I think it's the one thing that I've noticed right away about elite is that they really do things right. It's part of why I was so interested in sort of reaching this, having this concept of excellence together with them. But the concept here is that you've got to have a plan, and your deliberate practice has to make sure you're doing whatever it is, a squat, one of these dangerous, weights exercises. If you do it the wrong way, you can really hurt yourself, right? Same with how to do anything in hockey. You got to do it the right way. You got to be disciplined. You got to be deliberate about it. And the same, it goes with the growth mindset, because if you have a plan, you want to achieve something, the science says you can do it. That if you weren't given this particular skill at birth, unless it might be, maybe golf is an exception, but in particular skills, time, deliberate practice, attitude, coaching, all go together to allow you to achieve your goals. So, I think my question to you is, what's your thing for 2021? What do you want to get better at? Keep your goals simple, keep it short, keep it manageable, have a plan. Typically it should be something you do every day, unless it's physical, requiring, time off to rest. But I think to go back to this concept of self-efficacy and belief in oneself, you should know your weakest attribute as a player. You should know your weakest attribute as a student, and you should have a plan for deliberate practice to address those. And then call in the army of help, parents, friends, whoever it might be, to help you execute that plan. But I think, I like to say it without putting kids on the spot. What's your thing? Like, what do you do? What's your area of expertise? What are you good at? And I like to simplify it. I think I did this with the Academy kids. As an example, I said, well, outside of hockey, what do you like to do? And the kids, they always have a little fun with me, at least. And, they didn't know really what I meant. I said, well, what else do you like to do? Do you like to read books? I was hoping for some of those. And, someone said, I like to golf. And they thought it was maybe not the greatest answer, but I said, that can be a great answer. I have this sort of concept I call the overnight expert. So if I'm interviewing kids and someone says, I say, well, what do you do outside of hockey? And I say, oh, I like to golf. I would want to hear what they're going to say next. And if they say, oh yeah, I like to golf, it's fun, I would not be impressed. If they say, I like to golf, Mr. Diffley, did you know that golf is the second largest revenue generating sport on earth behind fishing? And did you know that in fishing, people actually don't fish to catch fish. They do it because they want peace. They they want to get out in the water. They love nature. They want to be with their pals. They want to have a couple of, ice waters. Be expert in something. And this goes back into a little bit some of the talks I had this fall with the academy kids, which is to be multi-dimensional. Be multi-dimensional. Just another dimension to your life might make the difference between advancing as a hockey player, advancing as a student, advancing as a person throughout your journey in life. So, this is what I suggest, that pick one thing you want to get better at, or really good at, even expert at. Have a deliberate practice plan. Maybe pick up one of these books and read it together. But have your thing and have your way, right? Your way of succeeding. So I think that's it. I sort of end, I like to end with just coming back to it. And I just put the words in print because, you can do everything right and things still may not work out, right? It's just an odds thing. You're increasing your chances of being successful. But you can do everything you possibly in your power to create the conditions under which you will begin to flourish. And so again, in my day-to-day work with parents, kids, families, educational planning, sports happen to be a passion of mine. So again, finding the right organization, the right time to do things, make moves, develop, grow. It's a very changing landscape. And again, that's why I was so excited when I poked in the tent a little bit with Elite and saw the kind of experience that kids could have, and honestly where it's going, especially as education changes right before our very eyes. So I think I'm going to stop there. I don't think we have any. Q&A. It's 7:51. It's never a bad idea to end early, and with about 8 minutes to go, I think I'm gonna stop there. Morgan, is there anything that I know you may be still listening. Is there anything else you'd like to add?